This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
How come they haven't done it already? Just out of curiosity.
Because of trades, because of what if they got to a situation they were going to be under the cap and they needed an extra $2 million. The one thing I've learned over the years with the Heat is they never do anything until they have to. So Big O, even though people are talking about PJ Tucker and his opting out of his contract for the next year, going to go into free agency, that's not official yet. That'll become official tomorrow. Everyone wants to maximize flexibility because there's a chance, for example, PJ Tucker opts into the low money and people are like, that makes no sense. But what if the Heat on the side said, you know what? You're going to be an early bird free agent next year. Take the 1 year now. Give us the flexibility. Next year, we can give you a higher starting point in your salary. We can work with you. The other thing I mentioned in my Sunday notes at SunSentinel.com and in the story today in the Sun Sentinel, because of what happened last year with the Heat, where they approached Kyle Lowry, the NBA says too early. I think everything is going to be according to Hoyle and by the book this offseason, because I got to tell you, the NBA, like a lot of leagues, is sort of looks at teams as recidivists. Okay, you did it once, you lost a second-round pick. There wasn't that much pain last Thursday. Let's face it. They wound up loading up with undrafted guys anyway. Do it again, it might be a first-round pick. Do it again, it might be a reduced salary cap. Do it again, It could be something more. So I think the Heat are being very careful. I can't tell you, Big O, how many times I've called the Heat on an innocuous question. Has Strus been taken care of? Has Omar been taken care of? Has Gabe Vincent? Not even a return text. They are doing everything here by the book. When Pat Riley talks today about welcoming the new first-round pick, Nikola Jovic, I doubt he veers into free agency because it's dangerous. Because even if you mention another team's name, unless that player is in free agency and free agency starts the talk supposedly at 6 p.m. Friday. And I think an interesting factor for the listeners here of the Acura Pembroke Pines report will find, I think the initial boom, Woj beats Cham, Shams beats Woj. I don't think that's going to happen as quickly Friday because teams don't want the league to say, wait a minute, it's 6:01 p.m. and they have a contract with this guy? That must have been a hell of a minute. So I think because of what happened last year, to review for people.
And by the way, add one more caveat to that whole thing. Sure. Let's be honest now. Woj is tied to the same agency that's tied to a shit ton of players.
Correct.
That's why he gets the in. And I'm sure those agents are going to hear from those GMs and say, hey, let's not screw this up, right? Because then you also ruin relationships.
Woj, you can win, and we won't tell Shams. And Shams has his agents, and Shams, you can win. He has Kyrie, he has Ben Simmons, and we won't tell your guys. But I think the boom guys, I think you're going to see some guys
you've never heard. Domino effect is what I'm saying of that whole thing.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see some guys you've never heard of reporting stuff first because they don't have the ties. So they'll go with what a player told them. So I think it's going to be very interesting. But again, to review so people know what happened last year, the NBA said the Heat contacted Kyle Lowry too early in free agency, and the Heat were, whoa, we tried to trade for this guy at the trading deadline. We knew what his request would be. We knew what the Raptors would want in a sign and trade. It was easy. At 6:01, okay, we'll do the deal we talked to you about in February. Okay, Kyle, we'll give you the contract we talked about on an extension in February. The Bulls, the same thing with Lonzo Ball, getting him from the Pelicans. But I think because the league came down semi-hard last year, I think teams are going to have to think twice. I think the newsbreakers will still be out there, and here's the reason. Even though negotiations begin on the 30th at 6 p.m., signings and transactions cannot be announced and completed until July 6th, when we're just about out in Vegas for the Summer League, until noon that day. So nothing can come from the teams. It has to come from the newsbreakers, from the agents, from the players. But the teams have to play it very careful until the new salary cap comes out, the new luxury tax comes out, the new numbers come out for the limit you can go into the tax if you're a recidivist team. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a week's worth of rumors. I think it's going to start ahead of time because it always does, but it's going to be literally Twitter driven.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of the guys in our family gets a story or two. And Jordan Schultz, he gets either NBA or NFL stories all the time.
Don't count out Winderman or Chang yet. We might have our moment in the sun.
Obviously, I expect Winderman and Chang, but I'm saying on the outside guys that maybe one of our guys in our family outside of the Winderman and the Changs could be getting something. So what are you smelling, by the way? What's Ira Winderman smelling?
Well, I don't know what The Rock is smelling, but I can tell you this whole thing about PJ Tucker to the Sixers, for them to give him the deal that he would want, they would have to trade not only Matisse Thybulle, but maybe Furkan Korkmaz as well. So they have a lot of work ahead of themselves before they can get to that $10 million that they need to. So I think that's a little bit shaky there. You know, there's a lot of people.
By the way, but wait a minute, hold on. 3-year, 30, and Miami's at 3-year 27, right?
If they're offering the third year.
Okay, but wait a minute. If they are, and it's a no-tax state, what the hell is the difference?
Because I think the third year's in flux. Because people ask me, why did Kyle Lowry so quickly agree to the Heat? I will tell you why, people out there in the Acura Pembroke Pines report. Because the Heat were the only team to guarantee the third year for a player who's going to be turning 38. A lot of teams said, Kyle Lowry, you're good. You led Toronto to a title just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We'll give you 2 years. We'll work on the third. Big O, I'm still not sold the Heat are willing to offer the third year to a player who will be turning 40. God bless PJ Tucker in the shape he's in. But at some point, you have to balance things. This takes us back to 2020 free agency, where Jay Crowder.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. They got to be willing to offer the third year if, let me tell you, if you're also telling him, because you brought this up earlier, if you tell him, well, you agree to a 1-year deal and then we'll get you after because you're a bird rights guy, that's going to be a multi-year deal.
That is going to be a multi-year deal. But then again, the Heat have the patience of waiting on the cap space, seeing what he does in the year. But more than anything, I would do it this way. I would do the third year as a games played the previous year or previous 2 years. If you show us in year 2, you can play 60 games. I'm going to set the bar low. If you can play 3/4 of the schedule, boom, you're in. Maybe total games from the previous 2 years, we'd have what would be about 184. If you play 120 of those games or something like that, then I would go with that also. So I think you could make it work as long as you can reach an agreement. But you know what? PJ's holding the leverage, and I'll tell you why. The next guy down on that tier of journeyman free agents at the mid-level is Thaddeus Young, who didn't get to the playoffs this year, who's already been, he's been from Philly to Chicago to San Antonio, to Toronto last year. So it's a second degree of a player there. So I think that he realized where they are and the league realizes where they are.
All right. What more have you been able to unearth about Orlando Robinson?
Yeah, that's an interesting name. So I got to tell you a little story. I'm out here in New Jersey, walking with my son the other day, and I said, hey, the Heat got Orlando Robinson. He's going like, whoa. 1, he was surprised he wasn't drafted. 2, he said, this is a big-time skilled guy offensively. He can help defensively. And he told me, kiddingly, he goes, Dad, I think he's going to make the roster. Now, I wouldn't go that far. But what I'm saying is what's interesting here, Big O, is this, and I wrote about it on my Ask Ira I just posted at sunsentinel.com. If they really are committed to Omar Yurtseven, and I'll say it here, and they damn well better be. And if they are committed to Nikola Jovic and he's not staying overseas, and let's face it, they're not having a noon press conference at FTX Arena to announce a guy who's not going to be here next year. That's another big. Plus, they have Bam. I'm not so sure that Dwayne Dedmon is long for the Heat. Because if you can get an Orlando Robinson at the minimum non-guaranteed Exhibit 10 contract where you can play it out, I think it's going to be very interesting. Now, a lot of this has to do with PJ Tucker. If PJ Tucker doesn't come back, you don't have a lot of veterans there. You can't go with Bam and then a 19 youngest Heat player ever, Nikola Jovic, an unproven, I know you love him, Big O, but Omar Yurtseven is not a proven playoff player yet. And then to go with an Orlando Robinson. So the Heat are building a nice young core of big men, but there needs to be one more veteran in there. Maybe it's still Dedmon. Maybe it's PJ Tucker. I don't think you need both. So I think what the Heat are doing is they're saying, Dwayne Dedmon, you were wonderful for 2 years for what we needed. You gave us the size we clearly were lacking, but maybe now they're moving on there. I like Orlando Robinson a lot. I'm curious what he could do defensively. But again, what the Heat have with all these guys they're adding are not complete players. Omar Yurtseven, slow-footed on defense. Nikola Jovic, I don't know if he can play a lick of NBA defense. He's going to have to learn the entire NBA game. Orlando Robinson, same kind of thing. So this is where the Heat developmental program will tell them when they get to the October start of camp, are any of these guys ahead far enough that they can move forward? So I think that's going to be interesting. I think the Heat are in a good spot developmentally. They always are. The Heat
Yeah.
always had
No,
these guys,
but
and
let me add something. Let me add
yeah,
something. What it looks like in Jovic and in Robinson is that you're also aiming more towards an offensive big man too. And that like Yurt still has to work on his offensive game. You can tell he's kind of raw, but he's a good rebounder.
yes,
You know, Dedmon's a guy that's also kind of limited in his offense too. Good defender, rebounder. But these last two kids that they just added, it seems like they're trying to find the big guy with the offensive skill set, and then we'll teach them defense
yes,
instead of the
absolutely.
other way around, that they get the guy that already has the defensive disposition, but now we've got to teach him offense.
Sort of the opposite of Whiteside. Whiteside came in great rebounder, great defender, couldn't play offense, forced the offense and wasn't. And
Right.
you know, this is curious, and I'm curious if Pat Riley addresses this at noon at FTX Arena. And you and I talk about this a lot in our Acura Pembroke Pines reports. It's becoming an offensive league. You have to outscore. We saw that in the Boston series when they couldn't get points. At some point, it becomes about outscoring. I think Pat Riley's coming around, and now we have to deal with stubborn Eric Spoelstra. So I'll
Yeah.
be really curious about that. But this is
Long, athletic, big
yes,
guys that can score, that can stretch. It's what you need in this league. And if any of those two cats become good defenders,
right.
then it becomes one hell of a player. You know what I mean? Because unfortunately, it's Eric Spoelstra who then has to put the puzzles together live on the floor, and then some of them have, you know, warts. Okay, I got to put him on the floor, but he doesn't defend well. I got to put him on the floor, but he doesn't shoot well. You know, that kind of stuff. This is what our dilemma has been with Bam, that you can't play him with another big man unless that other big man can really shoot from the
And
outside.
score.
And
Yeah.
I think that's what they're trying to find with Robinson and yo, bitch. I think that's what they're trying to find with
And
one
you
of
know
those.
what? You probably couldn't find two better defensive teachers than Malik Allen coaching, and you'll be out there with us in Summer League, and Alonzo Mourning being around the gym. You'll probably see him in Summer League. You'll see him before camp with these guys also. So the Heat certainly have the defensive mentors when it comes to big men also, which will make it interesting.
All right, so let's bounce around the NBA now.
Sure.
All right, let's go first to Brooklyn. The whole mess in Brooklyn. I don't know what to believe or what. Is Kevin Durant really mad or frustrated about this situation? Or is he just acting like it and saying, you know, let me act like I really am bothered by all of this, but I really want to get rid of Kyrie Irving? Or I don't know what's going to go on. So what are you hearing with the Brooklyn situation? What do you think ends up happening here? Because I don't think that there's not a lot of cap space available in the NBA as it is. And it's usually a lot of the mediocre teams that have kind of that cap space. So what's going to happen with the Kyrie situation? If he wants his money and he wants a multi-year deal, who the hell's going to give it to him?
Brooklyn has to give it to him. It has to give him everything he wants for this reason, Big O. When the Brooklyn Nets made the trade with James Harden to get James Harden, they gave their entire future draft to the Houston Rockets. So the years the Rockets don't get the Brooklyn Nets first round pick, they get pick swaps. If the Nets even think about rebuilding, every good draft choice they're going to have is going to go to the Rockets. That's going to be an unbelievable bonanza for the Rockets. They'll get Nets lottery picks. They'll swap into Nets lottery picks. The Nets' backs are against the wall. Kyrie knew that. He knew that he could squeeze every dollar. Think about this. Think about if someone worked, Sean Stanley decided, I'm only working 1 day a week, but I'm taking my pay the other 4, and then comes in and asks for a raise. Orlando Alzugaray, as nice of a Cubano as I know, still would go, I got to draw the line here, my good friend Sean. I'm buying you one buffet, the rest are on your own in Vegas. The Nets don't have a choice. The Nets have to give Kyrie every penny he wants because there is no plan B. So they have that. Kevin Durant knows if I voice vocally, you must give me everything I need to win. The Nets have no choice. They can't trade him. The Nets backs are, when you make your deals with the devil, you never get out of that contract. You are headed to HE double hockey sticks no matter what. So the Nets know where they are. This is what you do. This is what all the big 3 teams have done. They've gone all in. Let's face it. If Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade couldn't play with LeBron, the Heat would have been screwed. If things fell apart like they did with the Cavaliers with Karan, the Lakers wound up being screwed. You make your deal with the devil, you have to live with it. That's what they've done. That's what the Lakers did with Russell Westbrook when they took the big money. They knew they wouldn't have cap space. They knew they wouldn't have draft choices. They knew they were screwed. The Nets, that Kyrie and Durant will get everything they want from the Nets because there is no plan B. The Nets literally could just flip the sign out of business because if they lose Kyrie and they lose Kevin Durant, there is no path out of there but years in the wilderness, and they might as well move back to the parking lot in New Jersey because they will become that irrelevant.
All right, so I don't even bother asking about Durant. He's not going anywhere. He'll be there.
They can. And again, he has 4 years left on his contract, so it's not like I'm out of here, I'm not showing up. There's only one player in the NBA willing to give up millions by sitting out, and that's Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. By the way, Craig Zinn's Acura Pembroke Pines is celebrating their 14th year right now, their 14th anniversary. And the new Integra, the 2023 is in, $369 a month. The TLX Technology Package 2022, $479 a month. And they've got a ton of certified pre-owned vehicles with financing starting as low as 0.99%. So get on down to 15601 Pines Boulevard, just off of I-75 in Pines. All right, Ira, Donovan Mitchell. Now, I'm not even going to ask about Bradley Beal because he's staying in Loserville. Okay, so
take the money and run.
Yeah. What's going on with Donovan? Maybe a year from now, like you said, he gets his money, then he complains.
Have it all. Sure, we've seen guys do that. Donovan Mitchell still comes back down to the coach in Utah, and I almost wonder if Danny Ainge is not slow playing this whole thing so he can take care of that first, take care of the coaching thing, and then tell Donovan Mitchell, okay, where are we going from here when no one will have anything to offer and Donovan Mitchell will kind of be screwed. This Utah thing is very weird. To not have a coach at this point. Look, I'll give you the perfect example. The Charlotte Hornets didn't have a coach because Kenny Atkinson said no. And whether you like Steve Clifford or not, Michael Jordan knew he had to move relatively quickly. He has Miles Bridges in free agents. He has other moves to make. And he went ahead and made his move. Utah operates in their own sphere. I mean, it literally is, and I don't mean to condescending here, like they're dealing with their own religion. They just deal with things their own way out there in Salt Lake City, and we're seeing it in the NBA. That only is going to further confuse Donovan Mitchell. So I think that situation gets sideways. But at what point, Big O, do you stop hoping for something happening elsewhere and set your team up? The one thing we know about free agency, when it starts 6 o'clock on Friday, it moves at warp speed. Honestly, by Saturday or Sunday, we'll be done with most of the moves.
Yeah.
So Utah wants to make a Donovan Mitchell move. They got to decide in the next couple of days who their coach is and what their direction is and what they're doing with Rudy Gobert. They might have more work on the table even than Jersey, even than Brooklyn when it comes to the future of their franchise.
So maybe Danny Ainge is pulling a LeBron on Riley that he'll wait till after the moratorium to make his moves.
If he thinks he can hold the cards, honestly, I know you're kidding, but if he thinks he can hold the cards and control free agency, that would be such a Danny Ainge type of move.
By the way, for the record, I'm a Kenny Atkinson fan. I thought he did a marvelous job with the Nets, and it was really smart of him not to take a job for Michael Jordan. That's all.
Well, you know what? It's crazy. Everyone thought Michael Jordan's an owner was going to be the best thing that happened to the league. That guy pinches pennies and cuts costs more than anyone, and this is why, because it's his money. All these guys are going to ownership. As you know, whether it's Marino and he's going to move with the Dolphins and some others or Brady, they want to deal with someone else's money. Perfect example is Derek Jeter. Yes, he put in $25 million, but he took $5 million out a year for 5 years to get all his money back and never was invested. Michael Jordan is realizing the pain of ownership at times when you're not elite like his Chicago Bulls were.
Yeah, I mean, he's as bad a GM as great as he was a player. I mean, that's just it really is amazing. All right, what else are you working on the Sun on a very important and active week here in the NBA?
Well, today Nikola Jovic comes in. I'm curious if Pat Riley does talk about free agency. Last Thursday when we were at the draft, Pat came in after the first round, and Tim Donovan, the PR guy, said no free agency questions. I'm curious how much Pat bends that a little bit. Also working on a story about all the foreign players the Heat have had over the years and how they've really shied from that. And probably outside of maybe Goran Dragic and maybe Sasha Danilovic, you could look at Vladimir Stepania. There really hasn't been an impact. So if Nikola Jovic makes an impact, this will really be a breakthrough moment for the Heat and maybe get the Heat to look a little more overseas as well. So I think this is sort of a seminal moment coming up this afternoon at FTX Arena. So I'm working on a story on that. Honestly, you have the deadline coming up tomorrow. We're coming up on Wednesday to, like you said, the start of the Acura Pembroke Pines report. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Omar Yurtseven all have to be guaranteed. All will be guaranteed. And think of that, Big O. $1.8 million a year for each of them. Potentially your backup center, your starting shooting guard, your backup point guard. Think of the amount of money that for just over $5 million, the Heat are going to lock up their starting shooting guard if it's still Strus, their backup point guard if it's still Vincent, their backup center if it becomes Yurtseven, for 1/3 of the cost of what Duncan Robinson will make next year.
Amazing. The Heat are trying to break the Sasha Danilovic curse. That's amazing. God. Oh man, that was early in Riley's run when he made that selection. All right, follow him on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat and catch his work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Make sure you subscribe also to support Ira and all the great writers there. Ira, as always, we will see you tomorrow for the
full hour back home. Nice backdrop behind me, and we'll be giving the best of the Jovic press conference and looking ahead to free agency. Looking forward to it, Big O.
Thank you, sir. There you go. Ira Winderman. Catch him 9 to 10 tomorrow. We're switching inside the paint from Wednesday to Tuesday this week. All right, there we go. I like it. Good stuff there by Ira Winderman.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big